Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to one and all present. Welcome to this summit. I am Yagnesh Desai, Chartered Accountant, and I am the moderator of today's summit. It's my pleasure to welcome you all on this Global Virtual Sustainability Summit. The theme of the summit is Accelerating Sustainability Agenda, Opportunities for the Professional Accountants. This summit is organized by the Sustainability Reporting Standard Board, SRSB, and International Affairs Committee of ICAI. As a part of Azadi Ki Amrit Mahotsav, I will translate this into the English. As a part of Azadi Ki Amrit Mahotsav, celebration, I translate into English, celebration of 75 years India's freedom. This initiative is envisioned by the Government of India to commemorate and celebrate 75 years of India's independence, its glorious history and progressive growth time. In today's summit, we have the galaxy of speakers and the moderators who are going to dwell upon this most burning issue of the universal, so much so that at the Glasgow event it was discussed in great detail, and even COP6 also it has been discussed there. And without being too much of a ado, it would be my pleasure to invite CA Dr. Jai Kumar Batra, the Acting Secretary of ICAI, for welcome address. Once again, thank you everyone for joining us, and look forward for the very exciting and interesting gathering of all the learning speakers. Now it's over to CA Dr. Jai Kumar Batra for welcome address.
A warm greetings to all the dignitaries, distinguished guests, all the participants to this summit. On behalf of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, I welcome you all to this global virtual summit on accelerating sustainability agenda, opportunities for professional accountants. At the outset, I would like to extend my heartiest welcome to our most valued invited guest of honor, Ms. Asma Resmoki, Deputy President, International Federation of Accountants. I am extremely delighted to welcome our Honorable President Sir C.A. Nihar and Jammu Sariaji. My warm welcome to all the eminent speakers and participants and other stakeholders who are attending this virtual summit on sustainability. The objective of this summit is to dwell deeper into the emerging sustainability reporting ecosystem across the globe and bring both the Indian and global perspective together on the sustainability issues which are contemporary in nature. This two-day summit, global summit, is spread over 4 sessions on the topics, namely shaping on equitable, inclusive and sustainable recovery. Session 2 is on building a comprehensive global sustainability reporting system, climate risk and transition to low carbon economy. Accountants leading sustainability agenda, role of PAOs and regional bodies. And definitely these 4 sessions would provide a platform to all the participants to deliberate on the need of businesses in the current situations to adopt sustainability practices, collaborative efforts toward transition to low carbon economy in the welfare in the interest of the people at large, strengthening efforts towards building harmonized global sustainability reporting system, which is the need of the hour, and crucial role of the accountants in leading the sustainability agenda. So now, without taking much time, I would like to request our Honorable President Sir C. Nihar and Jammu Sariaji to deliver his inaugural address to the dignitaries and the participants to the summit. So now the virtual platform is yours, sir.
Thank you,
In the meanwhile, may I interrupt, sir? May I interrupt, sir? Uh, can I have the pleasure of introducing our Honorable President, Srinihar Jambusiraji? The President, sir, I beg 2 minutes from you to introduce you. So can I have your permission, sir?
Thank you, but briefly.
Very briefly, yes, I know that. We are extremely delighted to have with us our Honorable President, Srinihar Niranjan Jambusiriya with us. It's my pleasure to introduce Honorable President. Honorable President, Mr. Nihar is a blend of erudition, experience, foresight, technical expertise, and the professional excellence worth emulating, and a fellow chartered accountant from Mumbai. He qualified as a chartered accountant in 1984, and his post-qualification experience is 37 years. He possesses professional wisdom, vision, and a strong organization skills with a firm belief in all-round inclusive growth of Indian chartered accountancy profession. Honorable Sir is a member of Professional Accountants in Business PAIB Advisory Group of IFAC. He in his capacity as a president of ICAI is representing on International Integrated Reporting Council IIRC and the board of South Asian Federation of Accountants SAFA. He has also served as a member of SAFA committee on the professional accountants in business. So it's over to you, President, sir.
Thank you, CI Agnes Desai. Greetings to everyone present here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I know the participants are attending from various jurisdictions. Today's guest of honor, Ms. Asma Resmouki, President IFAC, global eminent speakers, the Agnes Desai. It gives me great pleasure to welcome each one of you to this very important summit, which is on global sustainability. And records show that we are consuming within 8 months of the year what Earth produces in 12 months. In other words, it means that we are borrowing resources from the future generation. Apart from this, even the nature has started reflecting this overconsumption in its actions. Like globally, we are witnessing the alarming effects of climate change, marine pollution, endangerment of wildlife, and deforestation, all amounting to untimely tropical cyclones, melting of ice caps, raging forest fires, and many more. The solutions to a range of sustainability challenges encompassing various social, economic, and environmental targets can be found by working together by all the stakeholders, that is governments, policymakers, businesses, civil society, organizations, and citizens. The effect of climate change is all pervasive, and unless and until every stakeholder is taken on board, these initiatives on sustainability cannot be successful. Recently, heads of state, government of nearly 200 countries attended the UN Global Summit, that is called COP26. Nations and businesses committed to the full package of action, which includes acceleration of measures for agricultural reform and innovation, sustainable production and consumption, as well as ocean protection. Discussions on climate finance funds that will help developing countries cope with climate change were held with the developing countries asking for much more than $100 billion in climate finance. Presently, there exists wide mismatch between climate finance and mitigation efforts, with developing countries calling for change in finance and technology support. ICAI Global Virtual Sustainability Summit on Accelerating Sustainability Agenda and Opportunities for Professional Accountants is at the apropos time when nations, economies world over are at the cusp of a transformative change after the collective dedication delivered at the COP26. Another welcome step is the announcement of formation of new International Sustainability Standards Board by the IFRS Foundation, which would enable setting up of global sustainability standards. The ICAI Summit is our contribution to the gaining momentum towards addressing core sustainability risks and building sustainable and resilient global ecosystem. In the post-COVID world, such risks have evolved dynamically, stressing the fact that the foundations of businesses world over are changing rapidly, creating new risks and new opportunities. ICAI, with a vision to drive positive change and promote the sustainability agenda, is working towards climate action and other sustainability initiatives. The Institute is committed for being partner in nation building and strengthening the sustainability reporting ecosystem in the country. Presently, the focus is on two crucial measures. Firstly, to strengthen and promote compliance with existing disclosure requirements of non-financial information. And secondly, to strengthen assurance framework to build a solid bridge between sustainability risks and corporate financial reporting. Taking it further, the Institute, through Sustainability Reporting Standards Board, is working relentlessly to augment the culture of accurate and reliable non-financial reporting and benchmarking sustainability disclosures. Various initiatives taken by the board relate to spreading awareness towards sustainability and educating members and stakeholders at large, as well as to demonstrate the importance and relevance of the role of chartered accountants in tackling sustainability issues. To name a few initiatives of Sustainability Reporting Standard Board of ICAI, they have developed Sustainability Reporting Maturity Model version 1 to assist organizations in not only assessing their present maturity levels, but also in identifying their capabilities and reaching higher levels of maturity. Capacity building and nurturing of skills of members through certificate course on business responsibility and sustainability reporting. Benchmarking global best practices in sustainability reporting via ICAI International Sustainability Reporting Awards and ICAI Sustainability, that is international as well as local. Launching nationwide ICAI Sustainability Literacy Drive, organizing workshops, video lectures, and webinars, seminars relating to pertinent sustainability topics. Despite the fact that during the last 2 decades, globally businesses have embraced sustainability factors and metrics in reporting as significant drivers in decision making. A lot needs to be done even now. Globally, it is perceived that the present voluntary fragmented approach vis-a-vis sustainability disclosures has limited usefulness for investors and other stakeholders due to the fact that the disclosures are non-comparable across entities, sectors, time periods, and often end up providing incomplete and misleading information. The Institute strongly welcomes the announcement of the IFRS Foundation of formation of its new International Sustainability Standards Board to develop global sustainability standards and rationalize the current fragmented ecosystem. At ICAI, we commit to contribute to the efforts of ISSB. We also welcome the commitment by the Climate Disclosure Standards Board and the Value Reporting Foundation to merge with the new board, and the publication prototype climate and general disclosure requirements developed by the ISRF Technical Readiness Working Group. To be effective, the standards will need to be brought into regulation around the world, together with associated enforcement, monitoring, governance and controls, assurance and training. Worldwide, adoption of the ISSB standards would not only facilitate achievement of true harmonization, but at the same time would replace the existing voluntary standards and framework. And let me inform you that in India, SEBI has declared that from the financial year 2022-23, in India, top 1,000 listed companies will have to mandatorily report on sustainability. Going forward, this may become mandatory for even smaller corporates. Professional accountants play an instrumental role in transforming how the businesses are run and fully integrating climate-related and other sustainability factors with financial performance. Many qualified accountants have the education and skills to take up such new roles. I am sure today's summit would highlight the global perspective towards the roadmap of actions and initiatives that would accelerate sustainable recovery and build a comprehensive sustainability reporting system with a focus on climate-related disclosures. The deliberations in the summit would also provide insights on need for robust reporting standards and the role of professional accounting organizations and practitioners in refining sustainability reporting of businesses and strengthening their assurance practices. Our collaborative efforts would immensely contribute in restructuring the global financial system towards long-term value creation, inclusivity, and resilience. And I am sure that the statement which was made by UN, that it is the accountants who only will save the world, will come true with all our efforts in the same direction. Thank you so much for joining this conference, and I'm sure that there will be good value creation at the end of the conference. Thank you so much. Back to you, Yagneshji.
Thank you so much, Honorable Presidents, for giving the highlights of what ICAI is contributing to the United States 17 goals on the sustainability. Thank you so much. And our institute is always proactive and rising to the occasion and to contribute in its best possible manner. Now, this summit is a global virtual summit. And as true to its name, we have dignitaries from around the globe. And I'll be very happy to introduce today's guest of honor for her address, Ms. Asma Rizmoki. She is the Deputy President of IFAC. Welcome, Ms. Asma. And now I introduce Ms. Asma. She became the IFAC Deputy President back in November 2020, after serving IFAC board for since 2017 November. In her role as a Deputy President, Ms. Rizmoki chairs the IFAC Planning and Finance Committee, having previously chaired the board's governance subcommittees prior to her election as a Deputy President. Ms. Rizmoki is a past President of Pan-African Federation of Accountants, PAPAFA. She has more than 25 years of experience in assurance services and has extensive experience in other types of engagement, like due diligence, valuation, agreed upon procedures, and internal control review. Ms. Asma, we are very fortunate to have you with us. And now it's over to you, Ms. Asma, for your views.
Thank you very much for this nice and kind introduction. Hello, everyone, Mr. President, ICAI members, ladies and gentlemen. It is a real honor and pleasure for me to join you today and say a few words about the sustainability agenda. Thank you very much to ICAI President Nihar Jambusaria for inviting me to speak. This is not just an important issue. This is the important issue for which there is great momentum today and for many years to come. And as professional accountants, this is ours to win, to be a force for good on a global basis and not just at our country's level. But first, let me say a few words on the IFAC-ICAI relationship, which in brief, I would say is strong and very important. For more than 70 years, ICAI has served in the public interest. And the transformation of your country over these last decades has been truly remarkable. And your professionalism and contribution as ICAI members and leaders will definitely remain essential for further progress. As we know, ICAI became a founding member of IFAC since its inception in 1977. And since then, ICAI has made invaluable contributions to the global profession. And many Indian professionals today are still serving with distinction as volunteers with IFAC board committees, advisory groups, and with the international standard setting boards that we support. So thank you all for making our work possible as we advance the development, adoption, and implementation of high-quality international standards. Now, to turn to our topic, I would first of all like to recognize ICAI dedication to accelerating the sustainability agenda and its many initiatives taken in this regard. And your president has mentioned a few of them earlier. And this summit is also an excellent example, as are previous initiatives taken by ICAI, such as, and I will just name a few, but there are so many, the institution of a Sustainability Reporting Standards Board, your certificate course on business responsibility and sustainability reporting, and also the development by ICAI of a sustainability reporting maturity model for benchmarking purposes. And these are just small examples of ICAI's great work with and on behalf of its members on sustainability issues. So let me congratulate you again on the great visionary work that you are doing with your members and the impressive endeavors in sustainability. As we all know, sustainability is a very broad subject, which essentially means managing resources without depleting them and without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. It is also supposed to cover a wide variety of topics, such as green finance, strong corporate governance, ESG, and other foundations of equitable and lasting economic growth. And many of us also think first of climate action. And all these concerns and more are at play in discussing a sustainable future. And as we know, they each and all have dynamic effects on each other. And the United Nations agenda for the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, is a very comprehensive framework for these issues and is very clear on this point, where it says that the SDGs are integrated and indivisible and balance the three dimensions of sustainable development: the economic, social, and environmental. And hence the three pillars or three Ps that we all hear about a lot, which are people, planet, profit. With COP26 so fresh in our minds, it is worth reflecting on the importance of climate action specifically. And unfortunately, we all know that we have so little time before we reach tipping points in global warming. And if we don't correct our course now, many of our difficult challenges in 21 will become ordinary parts of life, and there will be no going back to the planet as we know it today. The outcome of COP26 was mixed. Global issues remain on emissions cuts and the financing of climate action, especially for developing nations. And these are things that we must address urgently. Because even with 100% implementation of all measures announced at COP26, we are still on track to exceed a 1.5 degree rise in global temperatures. And remember, this is a threshold that climate scientists agree must be avoided to prevent the worst outcomes. Your country, India, sadly knows from experience how severe the climate crisis already is and can be. The Indian Ocean monsoon is becoming dangerously erratic, with long droughts and extreme floods that have taken thousands of lives and displaced tens of millions of people. And this extreme weather is an enormous threat to India, and the food security of people depends on Indian agriculture. And I want to emphasize again that this crisis is global and sometimes in unexpected ways. For example, in 2020, Indian scientists found that droughts in India sometimes depend not on the climate of the Indian Ocean or even the Pacific Ocean, but rather on the North Atlantic Ocean. So there is simply no way around it. We are all in this together, and even on opposite sides of the globe, our actions are interconnected. Our future will depend on the numerous choices that we need to make and on significant uncertainties, which are unfortunately unpredictable. But as a profession, we can and we must use what we observe now to make informed decisions that build sustainability into foundational systems and institutions. And this will require several things, such as engagement with public authorities to support the integrity of public financial management. Things like attention to the needs of SMEs and SMPs as the backbone of the global economy. Advancing a global approach to standards for sustainability reporting under the new ISSB, International Sustainability Standards Board, which has just been formed. Also, capacity building to reinforce the profession globally. And last but not least, continuously reinforcing our profession's ethical principles and behaviors. And the importance of professional accounting organizations PAOs like ICAI to these issues must not be underestimated. PAOs are, as we know, the nearest and best resource for professional accountants seeking to acquire new skills. And they are the natural liaison between the profession and public authorities. And let me tell you again that you are fortunate to have an exceptionally accomplished and active PAO like ICAI, which is working on behalf of the profession and the public interest in India. So to conclude, not only there is a vitally important need for our profession to lead on the sustainability agenda to fulfill our public interest mandates, but this is also a once in a lifetime opportunity for us to help our organizations, our clients, and our governments in making the tough choices they are facing to progress with the sustainability agenda. And by doing so, our profession can accelerate the creation of a more sustainable and resilient world with stronger economies and more equitable societies. And as this is a global subject, and in order to really play our role in the profession as a force for good, we must avoid working in silos. We must collaborate further as a global profession. We must educate, train ourselves and our members while opening ourselves to external expertise in the subject. So thank you again, President Jambusaria, for the honor of joining you today. And thank you to every member of ICAI for the great work you do. And my best wishes to you all for health and safety. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Asma Rizmuki. Really, you appreciated what is required to be done. And we all know that now the onus of accountants is not just confined to few numbers and figures, but it travels beyond that. And it's the social responsibility. If we want to see our next generation to breathe air, then we must be awakened. And that's what we fortunately and glad globally everyone is doing, including but not limited to ICAI. Thank you so much once again. This gives me, let me also tell you something, apprise you of the SRSB, that is the Sustainability Reporting Standard Board of ICAI. Friends, I must share something with you. The numbers are increasing, and as per the latest score, the number of participants are 718, and they are counting. Well, the Sustainability Reporting Standard Board, SRSB of ICAI, has been proactively taking number of initiatives to create the awareness amongst the chartered accountants, amongst the stakeholders, and across the society. SRSB Maturity Model version number 1 has been developed. It is an innovative solution to assist the organization in not only assessing its present maturity level, but also in identifying their capabilities and reaching higher levels of maturity. So ICAI is not confining its endeavor to train and create the awareness amongst its members only, is going beyond that and also approaching the various organizations and the corporate bodies. ICAI Sustainability Literature Drive has been launched to strengthen the Sustainability Development Goal SDG agenda, deliberate on the responsible behavior for one and all, and govern the sustainability with effective sustainability reporting and independent assurance. So creating awareness amongst all stakeholders that, look, if you don't care for the nature now, you will face music in future. As Ms. Asma has very rightly said, we are seeing the changes, dramatic changes in the weather, in the climate, and finding that the vagaries of the nature. We have started realizing the fruits of climate imbalances. Now, capacity building by launch of online certificate course of the business responsibility and the sustainability reporting, conducting the webinars through the virtual CP meetings, VCMs at both national and international level, benchmarking the global best practices for the sustainability reporting through the Sustainability Reporting Awards, both at international and the national awards at the national level, releasing the Assurance Standard Board standard on the assurance engagement SAE 3410, the assurance engagement on the greenhouse gas statements and other technical publications. So it's not just sitting idle, but it's constantly engaged in creating awareness about the greenhouse impact. Then the launch of the Carbon Fruit Challenge initiative, taking the innovative suggestions for making the Office of Chartered Accountants carbon neutral. You see, they say the charity begins from home. So they say that our ICAI say that before you advocate about the sustainability, make sure that you should try to reduce the paper consumption and see that your office is carbon neutral. I must tell you something here. Institute has taken an endeavor to reduce as much as the paper consumption, and that is it has reduced a lot of carbon footprint. The release of the corporate films on the simple steps to make our planet sustainable, to create awareness of the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. Going forward, the main focus area is to help business in integrating the SDGs in both business practices and reporting, and thus truly harness the power of the non-financial reporting for both environmental and social causes, along with developing the audit guidelines for the sustainability reporting. So in a nutshell, friends, this is what I wanted to apprise you of as to what ICAI SRSB is doing. The continued endeavor is to always educate its members and even the society at large. And I now say that due to some contingency, the Honorable Minister for Environment and Forest and Climate Change of the Government of India, Mr. Bhupendra Yadav, due to some contingency, he is unable to join us, but he has conveyed his wishes for the summit. So we are unfortunately missing him, but he's conveyed the best wishes to the summit. And as a result of this, it's time for me to acknowledge the Honorable President, our Honorable Guest of Honor, Asma Rumokiji, and our CA, Dr. Jay Kumar Batra, the Acting Secretary of ICAI. Thank you very much, all of you, for having set the tone of this summit. You have dwelled upon so detailed and engaged, and now the readers, now all the attendees are very eager to know as to what is there in store for you. So you have created, a kind of an interest in the summit, and thank you so much once again, all of you, having spared your time and shared your wisdom and thoughts about the global awareness. We are indebted to you, all of you. Thank you. Now we have 2 sessions today. Yes, 2 sessions, 2 moderators, and 8 panel speakers. We have 8 panel speakers today, and they are going to dwell upon as to they are going to have very interesting questions and answers. And so let me first introduce to the session speakers and all this. So the first one in the session 1, that is the shaping an equitable, inclusive, and sustainable recovery. The keynote address will be by Mr. Sanjay Rogani, Chair Professional Accountants in Business Advisory Group, IFAC. Mr. Sanjay Rogani serves as the Chair of the IFAC Professional Accountants in Business Advisory Group. He is also the CEO of the Standard Chartered Bank in Tanzania. He is passionate about and support the initiative which increases the capacity for the finance profession and human capacity, particularly in Africa. Then we have the session moderator, CA Rakesh Agrawal. He is from Reliance Industries Limited. Mr. Rakesh is a head in risk audit operations at Reliance Industries Limited, covering various business including refining, petrochemicals, telecom, retail and treasury. He ensures the quality of the corporate sustainability reporting and integrated annual report of Reliance Industries Limited. And I remember faintly that we've been all talking about it as sustainability reporting the goals, but a couple of years back, if I'm not mistaken, in 2017, he has demonstrated us the integrated reporting of the one companies. Then we have 4 panel speakers. The first of them being Erin Zubcevic, the Chief Intergovernmental Policy and Review Board, Office of the Intergovernmental Support and Coordination for the Sustainable Development Department of Economics and Social Affairs. Ms. Irena works with the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs as a director in the area of the sustainable development and supports high-level political forum on sustainable development, including national voluntary reviews. Then we have Richard Baldwin. Mr. Richard Baldwin is a director investment research with the United Nations. Mr. Richard Baldwin is the head of investment research in UNCTAD, United Nations Investment and Enterprise Division based in Geneva. He is the research coordinator for the United Nations annual flagship World Investment Report, as well as for a range of other publications on investment and enterprise development. Then we have Ms. Sanyukta Samadar, IAS officer, advisor on the Sustainable Development Goals Niti Aayog of Government of India. Ms. Sanyukta Samadar is an officer of the Indian Administrative Service IAS with over 2 decades of experience across the development administration, policy making, planning, and financial management. She presently leads the SDG efforts of the Government of India in the capacity of advisor SDG Niti Aayog. Then we have with us Mr. Sri Prakash Shukla, Chairman, Group Sustainability Councils, Mahindra and Mahindra Group. Mr. Shukla serves as the Chairman of the Group Sustainability Councils of the Mahindra Group, which has framed the group's sustainability strategy. He is a member of the Group Executive Board of the Mahindra Group, and as a Group President, he is responsible for the agri, aero, and defense sectors. So friends, this was the brief introduction of all the panel speakers and the session moderator. And now I invite the keynote speaker of the today, Mr. Sanjay Rogani. Welcome, Mr. Sanjay Rogani, to address the summit. Mr. Sanjay Rogani, I welcome you to the summit.
Can we start the questions first?
Yes, we can start the questions. Yes.
Yeah, so thank you. Mr. Rogani, having some
issues. It's over to the session 1 moderator, Mr. Rakesh Agrawal. Rakesh ji, it's over to you, sir.
Thank you, ICAI, Mr. Yagnesh Desai. Let's move on. Starting with Ms. Irene. Ms. Irene, I understand you have a great experience on behalf of United Nations, where you have worked closely with various member states of United Nations on as to how we can move forward and form a framework that is for everybody to be prosperous, enough to economically grow, fairly share the resources, while at the same time preserving the planet. Can you please share your deep insights and experiences around it?
Thank you very much for this question, and good morning, good afternoon to everybody. Thank you very much for this invitation. Well, it's $1 million question, really. But let me start by quoting the UN Secretary General, who said earlier this month that either we work together with renewed solidarity to build sustainable, inclusive societies and economies based on human rights and human dignity for all, or we resign ourselves to a future perpetual insecurity and crisis. So all member states of the United Nations in 2015, as you know, adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, including the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, as a plan of action for people, planet, and prosperity. So we have the framework. The 2030 Agenda is our framework. And it is more relevant now than ever when we are striving towards sustainable recovery from the pandemic. This pandemic has been a calamity for all. Millions of people have died. Societies have experienced an erosion of social cohesion, limited access to education, and reduced income and security. The infodemic of misinformation and disinformation and the lack of access to credible information continue to shape perceptions and undermine the application of an evidence-based response. Poverty is on the rise for the first time in decades, and hunger has further increased. Gender violence and violence against children has also increased. But with vaccine, the recovery is within reach. However, global solidarity is the most important now. Equitable access to vaccine for all is essential. Sustainable recovery must address poverty and inequality. It is our chance to build societies that will be more inclusive, economies that will strive to meet goals of the Paris Agreement and achieve lofty promises and pledges at COP26 and preserve the environment. But to achieve all of that, we need to walk the talk. We need to implement what we have pledged to do. Multilateralism, partnerships, and whole of society approaches are critical. And for this, we need transformative change. We cannot live with UN Secretary General calls short-termism. It is true that we need to act now, but the consequences of our action need to be long-term. And we need to address all three dimensions of sustainable development: economic, social, and environmental. Only through this, we will be able to raise to the top and work to achieve better lives for all now and in the future. To be able to do this, we need, one, respond to COVID through access to vaccine for all, but also build resilience for possible future pandemics by strengthening health systems and providing universal health coverage. For example, WHO COVID-19 Strategic Preparedness and Response Plan provides the global framework for the health sector response. Two, start an inclusive and sustainable economic recovery for all, with special attention to most vulnerable countries and peoples. Stimulus packages, debt relief, climate, and other types of financing need to be focused on sustainable recovery. Investment in sustainable infrastructure, energy transition and restructuring, transfer of technology, including bridging the digital divide, decent and green jobs are essential. Changing consumption and production patterns and achieving net zero economy should be the ultimate goal. Three, provide enabling environment for inclusive and more equal societies through inclusive institutions and providing opportunities for all, but especially young people, to education and employment. Provide access to basic services and housing for all segments of society, leaving no one behind, and achieving gender parity in all walks of life. Four, live in harmony with nature, decrease greenhouse gas emissions, halt deforestation, destruction, and loss of biodiversity, and provide nature-based solutions and ecosystem services as essential if we are, and they are essential if we can continue to live decent lives on our planet. And lastly, to be able to achieve all the above, we need global solidarity, political will, gender parity, and engagement of the whole of society from the highest ranks of government to community level, and increased engagement of private and business sector. Thank you very much.
Erin, many thanks. All this would require additionally a great amount of resources. We have a next panelist who has been heading as a research facilitator with respect to World Investment Report. That's Mr. Richard Baldwin. Mr. Richard Baldwin, can you please throw some light on United Nations agenda that talks about roadmap of actions and initiatives to mobilize investments and support for financing the 2030 agenda?
Yes, thank you very much for your question, and thank you for your invitation to this conference. The actions projected by the United Nations to mobilize finance and investment to achieve the SDGs. Let me talk a little bit from the perspective of my division in UNCTAD. We're a development organization primarily. So we focus very much on promoting investment flows that contribute to sustainable development in developing countries, and especially the least developed countries, of course. We published already some years ago, at the time of the adoption of the SDGs in 2015, and several times after, an action plan for investment in the SDGs. And that action plan, which of course you find in our World Investment Reports and on our website, the action plan covers what we call the investment chain. And what I mean with that is the chain from mobilizing finance in financial markets through financial instruments, all the way down to this investment landing on the ground in some investment project, which can be either a factory or a road or a power plant in a developing country, preferably. So that chain has, of course, many different actors along the way, and we have many different types of initiatives and areas of policy advice and technical assistance to stimulate investment moving into the most valuable elements of sustainable development in developing countries. If I start at the bottom for a moment, on the ground, we work with investment policymakers to devise investment policies to promote and facilitate investment in their countries. We work with investment promotion agencies. We work on topics like investment facilitation, which at this moment is a big theme among many countries, including in plurilateral discussions in the WTO. We as UNCTAD work on investment facilitation already for many years, even before those discussions, and we promote that with individual countries to be implemented through a whole series of tools. So that's at the end of the investment chain. We do most of our work, and we do most of our policy and advisory work with countries. If I move up the chain, then thinking about where the money should come from, where the funds should come from to invest in sustainable development, we're talking about financial markets, and we have initiatives such as the Sustainable Stock Exchanges Initiative, which aims at promoting the channeling of resources and promoting financial instruments for investment in the SDGs. And of course, if we look at the actors, ultimately the institutional investors, the funds, the investment funds that ultimately need to make investment decisions to mobilize funds and channel them to sustainable development relevant sectors. We have other initiatives there, such as our Association for Institutional and Pension Funds working on sustainable development. So there's a lot going on along the entire investment chain. Now, if I stay a little bit upstream in the investment chain with the institutional investors and the stock exchanges and the financial intermediaries, a very important aspect of the work we do there is sustainability reporting. Obviously, a lot of developments happening right now with the latest announcements during COP26. I don't need to elaborate on that. You will know all of this. We had our one of the intergovernmental bodies that we host in UNCTAD, it's an official ECOSOC expert body, which is the international group of experts on standards for accounting and reporting. We are the secretariat of that in UNCTAD, and we hosted a meeting of ISAR just last week. We had Mr. Likanen from the IFRS, the chair of the IFRS trustees, and he explained everything that's going on and the decisions that have recently been taken on sustainability reporting. One of the key quotes that I got from the various interventions was sustainability reporting is really at the heart of sustainable investment. And that's of course true because there's a huge growth in sustainability funds on stock markets, but you need to allow investors to make decisions, informed decisions on where to channel their money to promote sustainable investment. So sustainability reporting by firms is really important for that. And the request from the ISAR meeting is really for ISAR and for UNCTAD as the secretariat to work with the IFRS to channel the ideas of ISAR to the Sustainability Board and to work on two specific aspects, which is helping developing countries improve their institutional frameworks and ecosystems for sustainability reporting so as to better be able to adopt the standards that might come from at the international level, and specifically also to work with SMEs, micro and MSMEs, micro and small and medium-sized enterprises, to promote their engagement in this. So this is we're doing this already very concretely through our technical assistance in the accounting and reporting group of my division. We're helping countries in Latin America and Africa and in Central Asia with the implementation of a basic set of core indicators for SDG reporting, which we developed with the ISAR group over the past few years. And that's really a nice stepping stone for countries to start improving their institutional capabilities to promote sustainability reporting. So we're continuing this now based on the mandate we have just received, setting up regional partnerships. We've already set one up in Latin America. We're setting the next one up in Africa. We're looking to do this around the rest of the world to share experience and good practices on sustainability reporting. And that's our plan for the coming years. Thank you. I'll leave it at that for now.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks for sharing the global perspective. Let's hear local, one of the biggest democracies in the world. We have with us Ms. Sanyukta Samadar, who is leading SDG efforts through Niti Aayog for Government of India. Ms. Sanyukta, it is generally believed that for an inclusive recovery, we need a self-reliant and sustainable economies, for an inclusive recovery plays an important role for self-reliant and sustainable economies. What are the ways to build framework that drives a coherent set of actions for change around issues, change around strategies, the economic systems, policies, and institutions?
Thank you, Rakesh ji, for the question, and a very good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everybody on the panel here. First of all, I would like to congratulate the ICAI and Jambu Saria ji for having, set up this entire summit on surrounding the area of sustainability and the role of accountants and professional accountants, because it is just 9 years that we have remaining for the 2030 to set in, wherein the entire world has to kind of work together, all stakeholders, in terms of addressing the huge ambitious targets which are laid down in the the 17 SDGs with the 169 global targets. Having said so, coming to your question, Rakeshji, I think the pandemic has highlighted the very interdependent and interlinked domino effects of a viral sector-led socio-economic crisis. I mean, this crisis has kind of beaten all previous, the unprecedented nature of challenges that we have faced as a world. Now, this initial health crisis has simultaneously impacted upon sectors across education, nutrition, gender, industry, local business, livelihoods. And therefore, it has made us look at recovery as one where our pursuit is not merely to build back, but to build back better with resilience for long-term transformation. I mean, this particular aspect has emboldened us at Niti Aayog. Niti Aayog being the nodal agency and the government premier think tank for supervising the entire Agenda 2030 for the nation and for all the subnational levels, to pursue our mandate of localizing the sustainable development goals at all levels, going not only the global reporting part of it, but more so at the national level and going subnational to the level of the states and even now to the level of districts, which are the lowest units of administration in our country. And for Irina and Richard, it's like 700 plus districts that we have in India. So having said so, I mean, so it is the SDGs which I'm trying to say, coming to your question, is that the sustainable development goals, which cuts across all dimensions of development, particularly the social aspect, the economic and infrastructure, the environmental aspects and the sustainability aspect, this provides us just the right and unifying framework to pursue this entire agenda of building back better. And this interlinked nature of the SDGs, if you see, and the positive spillover effects of achieving its interlinked goals and targets, this provides us with the framework not only at the national level, but also at the state level. And now we have taken it down to the level of our districts to coherently address all the social, economic, and environmental challenges, which have, kind of laid a stress on our infrastructures for delivering not only the health services, but also in terms of nutrition, education, our infrastructural, and our livelihoods. So yes, that would be my answer to your question, that the framework is definitely the Sustainable Development Goals framework, the UN resolution of which was adopted by the 193 countries in the year 2015. That definitely becomes the biggest pushing framework at this time of building back better. Thank you.
Thanks, Sanyukta, for giving a perspective of Indian jurisdiction. Corporates do have an important role to play as far as sustainable growth is concerned. We have with us Mr. Shri Prakash Shukla, who is chairman of various group companies within the Mahindra Group, covering drip irrigations, covering sustainable farming, covering electric vehicles, aerostructures, special alloys, and a lot more. Mr. Shukla, we all understand that due to COVID-19, economies and societies has faced the danger of their existential crisis. Do you believe that a new approach would be needed for a sustainable, inclusive, and resilient growth path, or the earlier course of action would be sufficient?
In one word, answer will be yes, we need a different approach. Now let me elaborate. Thank you so much for having me here. I thank the Institute, Jambu Sariaji. Thank you for inviting. Businesses will need to keep evolving their approach, their strategy, their way of working, not just every century, not just every decade, but actually year to year. We need to evolve as the environment, the planet, and the society around us is changing. We have to keep learning ways of balancing the three-legged stool: people, planet, and profit. One of the best tools available for that is SDG, which Sayukta ji mentioned earlier. So I will not elaborate on that. In one of the earlier sessions, we had discussed SDG in detail. Last 18 months of COVID have convinced me without any doubt, with no ambiguity in my mind, and I am sure it has done the same for all corporate leaders, that world needs a new approach to sustainable and equitable growth. If you take just one aspect, environment, let me elaborate a little there. Pandemic has brought us many hardships. There is no need to repeat on that. But the truth is, pandemic also brought certain realities closer to us. If we talk climate, for the first time, many cities saw clear skies. You heard the birds chirping. That tells you what is possible if we were to put our mind to it. The jolt it gives you because you get used to it. A child born today has always seen sky gray and paintings show sky blue. So there is a dichotomy between what he sees in the paintings and what he sees in the photographs or when he looks up. Pandemic was the jolt which tells you what is possible. And the second jolt, first time you realize that many of us are not so essential after all. The more essential people were making it possible during pandemic that bread and butter was being put on the table. The vegetables, dairy and meat was being served. We actually saw that all the factory produced items were coming, all the farm produced items were coming, and it was making our life livable. The medicines, the vaccines, the masks, everything was getting delivered. It is those people, how can we say they can be any less important than any one of us? Inclusive growth means we have to ensure that the people who have made our life livable for last 18 months, they have to come on top of the list when we think of growth. For the first time in many, many years, we have actually started talking about environment also as one of the major items when we refer to sustainable growth. COP26 recently concluded with some progress, a large international global coming together of people will always result in certain compromises. But I do believe that we as a planet, we have worked together in COP26 to look forward to find new ways. How can we adopt more sustainable practices which will be leading to risk mitigation in our growth strategy? Corporates are very much part of civil society. Sometimes I find very interesting conversations where we talk about civil society as if it is different from business or corporate. I, as an individual, my children, my brothers and sisters, we are very much part of civil society. We raise issues with equal fervor while being an employee of a corporate, a chairman of few companies. I'm also a member of the society. I think time has come. We all look inside and look at a different way of doing business, of growing business as a corporate and as for the society. There is no ambiguity in my mind. Answer to the question I gave in one word earlier, and in one word I repeat, world has to look at new ways and new approach of doing business. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Shukla. Ms. Erin, we just heard from business representatives, national governments, as well as world investment community that all are having a common objective and endeavor to reach faster and faster towards sustainable recovery. United Nations is spearheading the effort, Sustainability 2030 Agenda. On behalf of United Nations, what would you like to mention with respect to support that United Nations provide to its member state for meeting economic and social challenges and also availing opportunities towards this goal of better sustainable recovery?
Thank you very much for this question. Well, I really cannot speak for the whole United Nations because it's a huge organization with a number of UN different agencies, funds, and programs. But I can say what we are doing in our Department of Economic and Social Affairs to support the countries. And also, I think there is a very coordinated response for the whole of the United Nations to COVID pandemic, as you can see very well, that different organizations have come together to prepare a response for sustainable recovery. So what is really important for us is that, as we have also heard from other speakers, is that we recover better. And we don't go back to the ways that were unsustainable before the COVID. And this is really an opportunity, as I have said, for us to look at how we can make our societies more inclusive, and what we can do to change our consumption and production patterns, and the way that we do things in order to get to the zero net economy, and also what needs to be done for the energy transition. We have also heard that the business sector needs to change, and that we need the whole of society approach and also the whole of government approach. So these are all things that we are trying to support member states of the United Nations to be able to implement it nationally. What we are also doing, we have a big database of accelerated actions, because as you know, in 2019, there was an SDG summit, and the political declaration, they declared this decade of action and delivery. So we have been looking at what countries are doing, what kind of accelerated actions they are implementing in order to achieve the 2030 agenda and sustainable development goals. And what is really important is to understand that this the 2030 agenda is really a framework for sustainable recovery, and all the financing and the stimulus packages. It's really important for that to be looked at very carefully by every government and also other stakeholders, and to see how the investments are being done and what is being invested. So this is very important. So whether we are going to invest in new and sustainable and green technologies, and have and listen to science, to have really the science and evidence-based policies that we are putting in place is very important. So I would say that the most important thing that we are trying to do from our side is to raise awareness and to provide the enabling environment and bring all the research that is being done in other parts of the UN system, but also outside the UN, in order to make countries get the necessary information, tools, knowledge, and science to be able to advance the 2030 agenda and sustainable development goals.
Thanks, Irene. Any support requires investment as one of the pieces, and that leads us back to Mr. Richard. Mr. Richard, we understand the crisis has rolled back the progress made in bridging the investment gap, and thus it demands a renewed commitment and a big push for investment and financing. In your view, how different stakeholders must engage and collaborate to meet the audacious goal of 2030?
Thank you. Yes. As we reported in our World Investment Report this year, if we look at the first year of the pandemic, international cross-border investment flows were down by about 35%, right? If I look specifically at investment in what we call SDG sectors, and when I say SDG sectors, I mean infrastructure, renewable energy, water and sanitation, hospitals, the obvious ones. But SDG relevant investment in developing countries was down by 1/3 to even 2/3, depending on the sector. In infrastructure, it was down by 55%, for example. So a big shock. The pandemic has operated as a big negative shock on investment for sustainable development. Now, actually, India, if we look at the FDI to India last year, it was one of the few countries where FDI was up. But don't be fooled by that. It was almost entirely driven by acquisitions of ICT, telecoms, and some construction projects. So it was mostly mergers and acquisitions and not new greenfield investment or new project finance that would actually make a major contribution, right? So in most of the world, or actually almost all of the world, investment was down significantly. Now, luckily, if we look at the first half of 2021, we just published during our World Investment Forum our Global Investment Trends Monitor, which looks at data on a quarterly basis. So the first half of 2021 already saw quite a big recovery. Already about 70% of the 2020 fall has been recovered. However, that recovery is really because of the doubling of investment in the rich countries. Investment was up only about 30% in middle-income countries, and 30% wasn't enough to make up for the fall in the year before. And it is still down by 9% this year in what we call in the UN the LDCs, the least developed countries, so the lowest income countries. So some major gaps and some major inequalities to overcome. If we look at SDG investment specifically, part of the recovery of this year, of course, also sees investment in the SDG sectors recover, but still far below potential in developing countries, still negative growth in the low-income countries. The only sector that's encouraging that continues to grow is renewable energy. Project finance, international project finance in renewable energy continues to grow. So that's a good sign, especially in light of post-COP26 developments. But beyond that, the picture is still quite bleak. And that on top of a trend that we have monitored since 2015 when the SDGs were adopted, and that we monitored against the target for 2030 that was already behind target in 2019, right? So we were already slow. The growth of SDG investment was already too slow. The gap was not being bridged, and put the pandemic on top of that, and we have our work cut out for us in terms of promoting more investment in SDG sectors. The encouraging part of this is upstream in the investment chain that I explained earlier in my first response, right? Because the money is there, right? Or the money that is available to be invested in sustainable development is growing. The funds, sustainable funds are rapidly growing and have actually almost achieved a boost as a result of the pandemic, or at least during the pandemic, they grew by about 80% to now about 3.2 trillion, we estimate. And that's encouraging. That, of course, includes many different types of instruments, especially social bonds, green bonds, but it includes also many ETFs and equity funds that rely on your sustainability reporting to function. So this is a good development. There are a couple of challenges. Let me name 3 challenges. First of all, the size looks promising, but it is still only about 3% of the total investable funds in global financial markets, right? So it's still not very high if you look at the total. So the total size, the distribution, right? Almost all these funds available for investment in sustainability projects are currently being invested in high income or higher middle income countries, right? So many of them are renewable energy projects in OECD member states, just to simplify the story. There are some funds flowing to developing countries, but it is still it's not enough, and we need much more of that. So total size is a problem, distribution is still a problem. And then, of course, there's the issue of greenwashing. So it is still not always clear what these funds, what the selection of funds is based on. And again, that's where you come in, and that's where the new standards come in, and that's where the work also in the EU on sustainability standards and taxonomies comes in. I understand you have Mr. Patrick de Camboer speaking later, so you will hear more about this. But those are, I think, the main challenges and the main things to work on. So continuing to increase the total size, improving the distribution to make sure it goes to the more needy countries, and making sure that greenwashing is adequately addressed. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard, for providing the high-level insights into the investment gap, which is generally a top-down approach. Looking at bottoms-up, we understand that non-financial indicators are equally vital things to be taken care in terms of both measuring and upgrading the performance. Ms. Sanyukta, you have been dealing with all the 700 districts across Government of India with respect to aggregating various information, monitoring, and giving them the feedback. In your view, should there be any examination of performance of business entities based on available non-financial information? If yes, what benchmarks should be formulated?
Rakeshji, that's a trick question, and there is no shortcut to this question. No, there is a complete yes. No, there is a complete no. So let me try and address it the best way that our entire ecosystem has evolved in the country in terms of reporting on non-financial information. So the development has been very encouraging, if I may say so. The National Voluntary Guidelines on Social, Environmental, and Economic Responsibilities of business, or which are in short called the NVGs. These were released, as you will remember, in 2011, and in 2012, SEBI, the Securities and Exchange Board of India, mandated the top 500 listed companies by market cap to make disclosures on business responsibility and sustainability indicators contained in these NVGs. Now, the NVGs were then, incorporated into the Companies Act of 2013, and then in 2019, again, the process of evolution got even further more mature, with the NVGs when they were upgraded and updated as the National Guidelines for Responsible Business Conduct. And this is where we played a major role also in these consultations in terms of, as Niti Aayog, in trying to align these national guidelines on the RBCs to the Sustainable Development Goals and to the entire framework of the national indicator framework that India has on the SDGs, and also the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, the UNGPs as they are called. So we see that gradually, business reporting has been more and more, it's getting more and more integrated and aligned with the SDGs. And that is what in early 2020, Ministry of Corporate Affairs updated the existing BRR also to incorporate the current global practices in non-financial sustainability reporting based on these 9 principles of the NGRBCs. And then the BRSR framework was instituted. And the committee with whom we worked very closely on the SDG alignment recommended that the reporting may be done, to begin with, by the top 1,000 listed companies, and further recommended that smaller unlisted companies below this threshold may also begin to adopt a light version of the format on a voluntary basis. Now, this we all realize that in a country like India, such a vast company, and especially with the private sector, very, very vibrant and dynamic and huge private sector, the capacity of are very variant, from the big companies to the SMEs to the smaller companies. So then that is why this kind of entire framework was developed, the BRSR, the big version and the light version, and that too it was started as a voluntary basis so that there is not much resistance, and it has to grow organically within the businesses also, that this non-financial reporting on the voluntary guidelines, on these 9 guidelines, which are very integrated and aligned to the SDGs, is not something which as a regulatory framework India would like the businesses to do, but for the own good of the entire sector, for the ease of getting investment from the worldwide the venture capitals and the funding agencies and investors. So I think this is what that kind of sentiment has to grow from within the business sector, and that is why it was kept voluntary for the smaller companies also. To address the issue of capability and the capacity of the smaller cap companies in terms of dealing with this entire, there are formats definitely when there are 9 principles and guiding principles, all these guiding principles have their corresponding formats, and to talk about these formats and to get hold of information and to develop this kind of a data ecosystem, a statistical ecosystem, that is also a challenge. And therefore I think that's where the role of the ICAI and the professional accountant becomes so much more important in terms of creating this entire atmosphere, creating the capacity within companies, the big companies, the mid-cap companies, the small companies, to deal with this kind of an information system, to generate this information. So a conscious effort has been made definitely to balance the objective of self-regulation through disclosures while ensuring that there is no undue compliance burden. So we are all talking about reducing the compliance burden on companies for the ease of doing business, which is I think one of the biggest drivers of industrial growth for any nation at this point of time, and especially after the pandemic. And I do believe that in this endeavor, the market-led investment demand for such disclosures will play a crucial role. So here we see that now we are also developing the taxonomy, the green taxonomy and an SDG aligned taxonomy for the private sector to elicit investment and to align their standards with the international standards, especially the EU and the global standards of taxonomy, so that the investment pool can also get channelized into the Indian companies. So non-financial disclosure, as I was talking, for raising capital is one of the most important levers that we find today. And this will shape the maturity of these frameworks. And we will see a very whole of the value chain approach here as we move on in terms of developing the taxonomies and developing this entire disclosure system. So we may require a sector-specific approach definitely here, because as well as towards the BRSR. But further, what is important is that it's the MSMEs who contribute to about 30% of India's GDP. And this is where our challenge lies in terms of sufficiently encouraging them, developing their capacities, making them familiar with this entire BRSR system. And I think that is where, in terms of, developing the maturity and voluntarily to bring this, integrate this with the entire, the ecosystem, I think that is a challenge. And this is where the basic reporting formats have to begin with. And this is where I feel you can play a huge role, ICAI can play a huge role, and the support from UNCTAD, the support from DESA. I can see Irina over here. I mean, I don't know whether she remembers, we had met in during the HLPF in New York, and it's good to see her again over here. So I think this is one of the big areas that we need to kind of work on. So yeah, that's it. Over to you.
Sanyukta, your insights into non-financial information leads to the question of profits versus sustainable profits from a sustainable business. So we go back to industrialist. Mr. Shukla, building a profitable business is a challenge, and running a sustainable business can be a bigger challenge. But if we rethink and reimagine possibilities, we can achieve anything. We understand that as a chairman of Group Sustainability Council of Mahindra Group, your company has taken or given key commitments, which includes doubling the energy efficiency, that is cleaner air, zero freshwater withdrawal, which is dealing with water, clean water, and zero waste to landfill, that is clean soil. So clean air, clean water, clean soil, along with stakeholders' distribution of wealth, is a great part towards sustainability. Do you believe the onus lies with the business to figure out the right balance between profits and sustainable profits? What's your opinion and assertive actions in this regard?
Very good question. I combine the two roles, so I can, as chairman of several companies, as well as chairman of the Group Sustainability Council, which goes beyond the companies where I chair. Personally, I believe now there is actually no trade-off between profits and sustainability. Sustainability actually is today a new way of building resilience and profits. The right approach is to leverage your sustainability actions to do better things, have more refined strategy, and do better business. To make sure that companies integrate sustainable practices in their way of working, the first step is that we make sure the leadership of the companies understand that sustainability makes for a better business. That is why someone like me who is chairing several companies is heading the Sustainability Council, and it has not been left down to a manager, senior manager, general manager handling it. That is the importance we give it to in Mahindra Group. Our belief is that what is good for environment and society is also good for business, and we have found it all these decades. I'll share some learnings from our own experience. Sustainable business practices can generate new sources of revenue. We call them green businesses. They can actually lower your energy cost and operational cost. Many of our initiatives have paid for themselves in just 2 or 3 years. They ensure that your compliances improve in all the legal matters, all the acts which are in place, regulations which are in place. They give you greater license, greater freedom, greater acceptance to operate in local communities, which gives you full support from the government and all other stakeholders. And as Richard was very rightly pointing out a few minutes ago, they also give you better access to funds, sometimes at slightly marginally lower cost, and enhance brand equity. Look at the benefits. I always say, why does any company, any business look at sustainability as compulsion or cost? Actually, it is good to do sustainable business. They go hand in hand. Our approach, and I'm sure it is being followed by other leading corporates also, so we may not be the only one, but I'm sharing my example. We first and foremost map ESG priorities with our business priorities. We see how does the map work. The role of business then is to offer better solutions so that ESG goals are concurrently met. I'll give 1 or 2 examples. For example, our businesses are promoting good seeds, good farm practices, farm mechanization, micro irrigation. Now, all of them, you can call them businesses, but at the same time, they are also making a very positive impact on reduction of poverty, elimination of hunger. They are giving more people an opportunity to experience good health, better life, well-being. They go hand in hand. We need to map them together and say which business, what impact it is having on society, what impact it is having on environment. And when you see it together, it all starts making sense. Let me share one more key aspect which is often not talked about. When you share it widely in the organization, I'm telling you, your people take pride. I know each one of my employees takes pride when we talk about, thanks to our micro irrigation products, we saved so much water. Once employees have pride in making a positive difference to society and environment, you don't need to tell them. You don't need to instruct them. They become the change agent themselves. They come back to you and tell you, sir, ye kar sakte hain, we can do this, we can do that. And boss, the head of department, needs only to say, yes, go ahead. Very often it pays for itself. Sometimes it is a minor cost. But I do believe that there is a very high coefficient of correlation between sustainable business performance and our progress on ESG parameters. Both go in hand in hand very admirably, no doubt about it.
Thank you. Now the last question to each of the panelists. We have 1 minute left. So 15 seconds, each one of us. So if in one word, we have to give message to the broader world to be acted upon, what that one word for sustainable recovery mean? That one word from each one of you. Irene, can we start?
Accelerated action.
Thank you. Mr. Richard? I think you are on mute, sir.
I would say pass. In one word, all the things to be done, it's very difficult to summarize.
Ms. Sanyukta?
I would definitely say sabka saath, sabka vikas, collective efforts, inclusive growth.
Mr. Shukla?
There is no trade-off between profits and sustainability. They go hand in hand.
I would like to just say in one sentence, whatever we deal with Mother Earth, it is multiplied back and given back to us. So rather than taking it or borrowing it from her, we need to give her more for us to be sustainable, to live in a better world. With this, let me hand over the session back to the Master of Ceremony, Mr. Yagnesh Desai. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Rakesh.
Thank you, Rakesh, for wonderfully orchestrating the session and handling the session. I really appreciate the way it's been. And thanks to all the panelists for sharing the wisdom and views and all. And I like Sabka Vikas, Sabka Saath. Very good sentence. Like that's the philosophy of Modi ji. And the best thing is that we should give back to our mother nature. I remember one anecdote, and I feel happy to share this with you. At one point in time, our president, C.A. Nihar Jambusera, said that while you're discharging your duties in a profession and talking about the sustainability reporting, global governance, and just now Shuklaji said there's a goal congruence, that while doing this sustainability reporting and all this, you're also saving costs for the company. So Mr. President has said that you please ask yourself as your conscious a question, what have I given back to the society? See, everyone is complaining that, oh, there's a lot of heat, no rain, it's too much, it's very hot, sometimes it's very extreme wind, extreme cold season, sometimes it's extremely raining. Mr. President asks all of them a question. have you ever asked yourself, what have you done for the nature? Have you ever planted one tree on your birthday? Have you ever planted one tree on your wedding anniversary? No. That means we have no right to complain. And as Rakesh ji has said, तुम 1 lakh देंगे वो 10 lakh देंगे. Mother Nature will give 10 times more than what you have given. So the more we give, the more we'll get from the nature. But friends, thank you very much. Before I conclude, I would like to invite Mr. Sanjay Rogani for his speech. If he's here, Mr. Sanjay Rogani ji, please, I invite you for the keynote message.
Thank you very much. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are. Very well.
I can tell you I learned a lot from that conversation. And I know I was supposed to start this session, but this is about sustainability. So if I'm not there, we can move forward, which is the way to take charge. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and it's an absolute pleasure once again to be engaged in the institution's keynote today. My name is Sanjay Rogani. I represent IFAC. In IFAC, I am the chair of the Professional Accountants in Business Advisory Group. As you see from my background, I work for Standard Chartered Bank as a CEO, but I'm a Tanzanian and maybe miles away from most of you. And if one thing the pandemic has done is it's got us much more closer together. And we should use this closeness to our advantage. Let me start with a quote, and Rakesh ji will remember this quote. When you create value for the society, I want to repeat, when you create value for the society, you become valuable. And I think those last reflections were very much driven by creating bigger value for the society. Just a few months ago, my committee, the IFAC Professional Accountants and Business Advisory Group, met. And our main message was along this theme. It's all about sustainability and creating value to the society. The ICAI priorities, at that time, the priorities for sustainable reporting were well presented by Sri Jambusaryaji, and it was very, very exciting to know, what are the plans. And more importantly, the moderator of today, Rakesh ji, was there, and he gave us the best practice from Reliance, and particularly the quote that I mentioned was from him. So I guess it's true that, business, government, accountants, and individuals all become more valuable if we create more value for the society, which is true. I also recall that Sri Jambusaryaji at our meeting recited a quote, and this was his quote. He said, "We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children." And I think this is very important because that means we have to leave this world in a better place, very much. Now, I see some of the colleagues have already spoken about SDGs when they started in 2015. The 193 UN member bodies that signed up to this, we agreed on the 17 interconnected interventions, as we call them, or priorities. And it looked at 4 dimensions: prosperity, poverty, inequality, and the whole aspect of planet, which is climate. And clearly we made a lot of progress. But if we look back, 24 months ago, and all of us were probably on this forum, and we were asked to predict the world in the future, I'm sure we would all have miserably failed. And that's the status of SDGs, that we made progress, but there's been a miserable setback, a very, very devastating setback. I think what the world has taught us in the last 24 months or 18 months is that there's only 2 things that are certain. Going forward, the world is only going to be more uncertain, number 1. And number 2, we've all seen that the pace of change is still going to be more and more and more. So those are 2 certain things. But it's also taught us something else, that as human beings, we are resilient. We have the power. We just have to use our power in a much more matured manner, which is critical. So let's look at post-pandemic. What are we talking about? We are talking about building back better. The question that comes to mind as a leader and as a leader of the Association of Institute of, International Federation of Accountants is, what are we building? What are we really trying to build now? Do we even know what has happened fully? So what are we really building? I think this human crisis that has impacted us, we call it COVID-19, has actually brought in a lot of sustainable development inequalities. And whilst it's a big challenge, I guess it brings us an opportunity to reset. Reset in the way we engage, reset in the way we collaborate, and reset really in the way we take actions. And today's call is about actions. So if I now have to step back from the past and look forward, I think with the discussion we've had, even in this engagement, is value creation will change. There's some very subtle messages that came from my colleagues, and I was trying to capture them, and I'll try and cover them also. Number two is really the role of whether it's business, government, and us as professionals is going to continue to change and evolve. What is important is how quickly we can define it so that we get onto the move, and define it with a purpose and under appreciation that the world is only going to be more uncertain, which is very key. And I think dealing with pandemic issues, sustainable development goal issues, and then we also have this situational awareness. When a tsunami comes, we all start jumping. So now there's COP26 and we're all jumping. And then there's biodiversity issues. So things will continue to be, tsunamis will continue to be there. What is going to be necessary is how firm we continue to have an unwavering focus and attention to the commitments we make. So the picture is bleak, but the picture is bright. The choice is ours. I really like what Mr. Shukla said, and we talked about the role of business. I sit in business. I'm incidentally also the chairman of the CEO Roundtable in Tanzania, and we have 164 CEO members. And we constantly talk to the government about this and the society and the investors, that the private sector actually, if you look at the world, and maybe I'm being a little bit more biased talking about Africa, then 90% of the total production that happens in our continent is done by private sector. 75% of the total credit that is taken, whether it's from investors or from banks, etc., is taken by private sector. The private sector also employs 90% of the population, where it's about jobs. And then 2/3 of the investment, which is 67% of the investment in any community, society, nation, is done by private sector. So if you just take that equation and say, can you really make a change without bringing in private sector into the equation? The answer is no. I think that we've now all taken a much more bigger recognition that the private sector has to work hand in hand in any equation we have, if it's a national building equation. The second thing is that, I like what Mr. Shukla said, that if there is one thing that we all have learned from the pandemic is why sustainability is necessary. I think some of us were in a very different mindset, and I think everybody now is appreciating that the need and demand of us all committing to sustainability is much more important. So this is your time when people are vulnerable to get bigger commitments. And we need to have a starting point. And I really like what Mr. Shukla said from a business perspective, that we need to define purpose-led profitable businesses. I repeat, purpose-led profitable businesses. That's the game we need to play. Yes. And we need to demand a bigger role of everyone, including business, in planet, people, prosperity, so that it equates to responsible profits, which is very key. There is already a tsunami of expectation from our global investors and certainly from our clients. Everybody wants to be more responsible. So if you don't really change, can you afford that? So let's make use of this opportunity when everybody is converging on the mindset, at least in a better manner. And it's time to step up. I do want to just talk about, when we're talking about private sector, it's also good to share much more best practices. Rakesh ji is on call, and I can tell you one of the most ambitious companies we have seen across the world is Reliance. And we were very fortunate to have a session from him where he talked about an ambitious new energy and new materials business. And someday I hope he can do a learning session just on that. But getting to net zero by 2035, Rakesh ji, is commendable. And for us, it was an illusion until you spoke to us how it's going to happen. where I sit as Standard Chartered Bank, even as a bank, which is a bank which is committed to Africa, Asia, Middle East, which means 2/3 of the global population, we have 3 commitments. One is Accelerate Zero, so getting to net zero by 2030. The second one is lifting participation. In Accelerate Zero, we're also trying to support our clients with transition finance. And the role is to impact 1 billion lives. And then the other one is lifting participation, which is all about financial inclusion to the underprivileged, women, and the lower end SMEs. And that way we'll create a more equitable world. So we are trying to impact 1 billion lives there. And the third thing, this is learning from India, is a business concept called resetting globalization, where we can now take local SMEs, use them, strengthen them, and influence external business. So, and we want to take 500,000 businesses who can now become global players. So that's how we all are trying to, use our own strength. The important thing is what my colleague Shuklaji said just now, is to recognize all these best practices and to get them together. And I think ICAI can do that. And the more you share, the more, we'll pick from best practices. And Mr. Shukla also said that it's a matter of pride. Even the workers in the company want to become part of the equation. Like I said, if we employ 90% of the total employees in this whole world, and we can inspire them with a purpose-led, profitable model, clearly the impact can be significantly exponential. And that's what we have to do. Now, finally, I just want to come up to, my message in terms of key actions for all stakeholders, whether it is government, the institute, private sector, or businesses, or stakeholders. So I was listening to everybody, and I kind of put in, some alignment in the messaging. And I would say that my recommendation is, is looking at these 4 C's. The first C is let's play the game of commonness. Let's look at the horizon together, medium term to long term. Let's create goals together. Let's create targets and measurements together. Let's create strategies together. But more importantly, let's also become more broad-based, rather than my country, my national priorities. Let's look at the world, because we are not in isolation. We need to recognize we are part of the world. And I really like the conversation we've had on investment and funding from Richard. The reality is there is a lot of funds if we create the right passion and the right purpose. So that's commonness. The second one is computing and technology power. We need to harness and optimize on that. Even including to the World Economic Forum, unlocking technology for global goals can have an impact of up to 70%. Now, for no reason, I'm not the right analyst to confirm to that, but I still believe personally that there is a massive opportunity if you optimize on the power of data and technology. The third is collaboration. And I think the biggest lesson we should take from the pandemic is how there were suddenly no boundaries, no rules, no principles, no regulations. When pandemic came, we all forgot and we become one. And we all started moving towards a common agenda. So use that power and nurture it and say, how do we become one when it becomes SDGs? I think that's a big area of ours, including how we use talent. We forgot it's our talent. It became a national talent or a global talent. So it's not just about our ambitions, but about how we become global. And then finally, I must say that our big role is to drive confidence. The world is fragile. The world is vulnerable. The world is really, really challenged. It is our role, whilst we are asking for bigger things, to drive confidence. And that can be done in multiple ways. But the Institute can also play a bigger role. And then finally, I just want to end, because we're talking about professionals today, accountants, in terms of what, as IFAC and myself, believe are the important role of accountants. So again, I'm going to use 5 C's. I've just finished 4 C's in everyone's role and 5 C's. Number one is let's use C for character. I think the accountant is best placed to make sure that he or she influences the character of the organization. The character of the organization will come from a fact based on their commitment on a purpose-led, profitable organization. So it's all about making sure sustainability becomes a key part of the equation. The second one is championing. I mean, at the least we can do is champion, whether it's integrated thinking or integrated reporting. This is a huge value driver. And I think at the moment, there is a big appetite to understand this more, and we need to make sure that we optimize on it. The third is change. Be the change that the world needs to see. You need to champion it. The fourth is communicate. Let's not use IFRS, but language that people can understand. And I think Shuklaji spoke about this. And then finally, I want to come back to confidence. This world will require more confidence. I end my message with that. I want to wish you all well, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Sanjay.
Sir, you are muted.
So thank you everyone thank you sir for very good keynote speech. Now I'll be tad faster as we are running a bit late. The second session is about building the comprehensive global sustainability reporting system. And the keynote speaker is Mr. Jeffrey Hells, Chair SASB Value Reporting Foundation. We are privileged to have Mr. Jeffrey Hells. Mr. Jeffrey Hells serves as the chair of the Standard Board of Sustainability Standard Reporting of the Value Reporting Foundation. In his role as a chair, he oversees the agenda setting and the due process associated with the SAB standard maintenance. Then we have with us the session moderator, none other than our own CA MP Vijay Kumarji, the Central Council member of ICAI. CA MP Vijay Kumarji is a Central Council member and is currently serves as the chairman of Accounting Standard Board, Valuation Standard Board, and Digital Accounting and Assurance Board of ICAI. He's got more than 29 years of experience in the industry as a chartered accountant and in practice. Then we have the panel speaker, Mr. Amarjit Singh, Executive Director, Security Exchange Board of India, SEBI. He is working with SEBI for last about 26 years has extensive experience in regulation and supervision of security markets. He's presently working as an executive director and in charge of the corporate finance department. He presents SEBI as a part-time member on the board of the National Financial Reporting Authority, NAFRA, and on the board of the governors of the Indian Institutes of Corporate Affairs. Then we have with us Mr. Patrick de Camberg, Chair European Lab Project Task Force on the EU National Non-Financial Reporting Standard PTE and IFRS. He is the president of the French Accounting Standard Setting Authority. He has recently prepared 2 reports on the future of the accounting profession and on the propositions to develop further non-financial information. He is currently the chair of the second project task force on European Sustainability Reporting Standards. Then we have with us Ms. Jessica Fries, Executive Chairman Accounting for Sustainability. Jessica Fries is the Executive Chairman of the Accounting for the Sustainability Projects A4S, established by His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales in 2004. She had led A4S since 2008, working with the finance community to catalyze a shift to the sustainable economy with a focus on the practical actions and targeted interventions capable of achieving global challenge. And then we have CA Hemant Sabharwal, who is a partner with the Price Waterhouse since last 24 years and having experience in the corporate and very extensive experience in the sustainability assurance, integrated reporting, and business responsibility reporting and the waste management. So without doing too much of ado, I will now request and invite our keynote speaker for the second session, Mr. Jeffrey Hells. Sir, it's over to you now.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here, and I'm thrilled to see the Institute actively engaged in trying to address sustainability issues. And from my personal view, there are many crises that we face globally right now, and I really do believe that the accounting profession has a tremendously important role to play in helping to address those crises. And just as a little more background, I am the chair of the SASB Standards Board at the Value Reporting Foundation, but I'm also a university professor, and I teach accounting and now more recently sustainability reporting as part of my job. And in fact, my students are awaiting me shortly, so I'll have to duck out soon after this. But what I wanted to talk about this morning with my few minutes with you is to just talk a little bit about the history. I've studied and researched and taught about the history of accounting for decades, and so I'm quite interested in it. I think it's a very exciting time, and leads well into the topic of today's panel about building a global system that is comprehensive and can address sustainability needs. So, when we think about where accounting has come from historically, in my view, a big step forward was, over 100 years ago now, in the early 1900s, when there began to be a view that disclosure could be the basis for regulatory reform. And I'm sure we've all heard some of these quotes, but one came from Louis Brandeis, the Supreme Court Justice in the United States, saying that publicity is justly commended as a remedy for social and industrial diseases. Sunlight is said to be the best of disinfectants. Light, the most efficient policeman. And so that idea found its way into regulation, and soon there were regulatory expectations that companies, if they were going to be publicly traded, would need to provide reports that accounted for their activities, and that those would need to follow generally accepted accounting principles, and that they would need to be audited to assure that information. So that process was pivotal, but it took decades and decades to evolve. So, we've seen many different accounting standard setters come to the forefront in business and do work, and that work often gets handed on to the next. And in the United States, there were two standard setting bodies that preceded the creation of the Financial Accounting Standards Board, which didn't happen until 1973 or so. And right around the same time, we know that the International Accounting Standards Committee was also created at that time and existed for another 30 years before the creation of the IASB. And really what happened at each of those points is that nothing starts from scratch, and the work that was done before gets handed off to the next institution. And the idea, the hope, is that the next institution is a good steward of the work that had been done before and is in a better position to advance it. And I think that we've seen that take place with every one of these handoffs that's happened before. Now, what's unusual, I think, is that we're seeing that again now, and we're having the opportunity to live at a time and to work at a time where we're seeing another major evolution take place. So if you think about sustainability reporting, one of the major advances happened when the Global Reporting Initiative was founded in 1997. And for decades, they worked to develop their standards to help companies to speak more clearly and credibly about the good that they were doing with respect to the impacts that they were having on the world around them. And then in 2011, the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board was founded and began developing standards that would also try to address the needs that capital markets have for information that is more likely to be financially material and able to be processed in a way that capital markets could then utilize. That work has gone on for 10 years, but we're now seeing a coalescing of other frameworks and organizations that also have a similar focus on investor needs. And so, earlier this year, the Value Reporting Foundation was founded as part of the merger between SASB and the International Integrated Reporting Council. And so that brought integrated thinking, integrated principles, integrated reporting together under the same foundation with sustainability standards, SASB standards. And now we're seeing, again, two other very important movements. And one of those was the advances that we're seeing in Europe with moving from the non-financial reporting directive to the corporate sustainability reporting directive. And that is a major step forward and is going to, I think, really deliver on a lot of what the promise was when the NFRD was originally passed. And it's wonderful to see Patrick here because he's playing a very critical role in that as part of that regulation, of course, and I'm sure he'll talk about this, that EFRAG, the group that he has been working with, has a mandate to become a standard setter and to establish the standards that would support the aspects of the CSRD. And so that's a very important initiative. And then we just saw at COP26 the announcement that the IFRS Foundation would create a sister board that would sit next to the IASB, and it would be the ISSB, the International Sustainability Standards Board. And that was going to be formed by a consolidation of the Value Reporting Foundation with the Climate Disclosure Standards Board. And so again, a further coalescing of the investor-oriented frameworks and standards that are out there. So it's really quite an incredible time to be part of this and to see this all happening. Now, one of the things I think it's important to recognize is that disclosure as the basis for regulatory reform was never meant to be an end in itself. That the goal was always that this would lead to change in action, and I think that's really critical. And it requires an entire system to be able to do that. We know that information has to be credibly assured. We know that information needs to be efficiently gathered. We know that there needs to be a way to disseminate that information through a market infrastructure. And so, it all needs to work well together. And I appreciated the remarks of Sanjay, who suggested that we do need to think about working globally together across national boundaries. Very important. When I think about what needs to be done, the standard setters that are out there, whether they're accounting standard setters or the sustainability accounting standard setters, and the regulators that oversee capital markets as well as broader policy requirements, they all need to work together. And I think that's really, really important for the system to function. Ultimately, I think that it comes down to people. Yes, we need world leaders to work together. Yes, we need business leaders to actually lead. We need investors and capital markets to move the needle on this. But ultimately, nobody is going to really accomplish anything if the employees, the citizens, the consumers don't actually care about sustainability issues. And I think that we believe that they do. But at the end of the day, it's all in our collective hands to actually deliver on that. So I'll just wrap up my remarks by saying I have never been more optimistic about the future of the accounting profession and its role in delivering on the sustainability crises that we face. But I would also say that that optimism is also balanced by a recognition that much work remains to be done. And so it's wonderful to be here to see the Institute engaged in that work, and I applaud the efforts. And I wish I would be able to stay for the entire panel, but again, my students await, so I have to go. But thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thanks to you, rather, Mr. Jeffrey, for you, and more so, I was feeling very connected with you on a lighter note.
We do share a likeness.
Yes. We do share the common hairstyle. Thank you so much, friends. And this has been a great learning curve for all of us. Really appreciate your time and wisdom and sharing your thoughts. Now, I'll be very quick to hand over this session to our session moderator, CA MP Vijay Kumarji, the Central Council member. So, sir, Mr. Vijay MPG, it is over to you, Mr. Vijay Kumarji.
Thank you, Yagnesh. Jeffrey, it was a pleasure listening to you, and thanks for setting the context with the keynote address. Hearty welcome to the panelists. Very happy to moderate the panel, which is so eminent, and greetings to all the participants. Having heard right from the first session and all the speakers, I don't want to introduce the topic, so let me take the first step directly to interact with the panelists. Amarjit ji, if I can come first to you. You are aware that across the world, almost all the countries are now either mandated or in the process of mandating ESG-related disclosures. In India, SEBI has taken the lead, and effective this current fiscal, you have asked the top 1,000 companies by market cap to look at voluntary reporting of business responsibility and sustainability reporting, and mandatory from the next year. Just wanted to have your perspective for the benefit of all the participants who are listening to you now, as to, from SEBI's perspective, how do you look at leveraging the information which you would get through the sustainability reporting which the companies would do? And do you believe that there is appropriate governance and controls over ESG reporting which is existing now or needs to be established?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Vijay Kumar. I hope I am audible. Great. So, first of all, let me compliment ICAI for organizing this event close on the heels of COP26. I think it's very timely, and it's a pleasure for me to be a part of this event. Before I address your specific questions, just to set the context and give a bit of a background, let me talk a little bit about how the sustainability reporting has evolved over time in India, and SEBI has taken the lead in doing that. So this space is not very new for us, if I may say. It goes back to 2012, when SEBI came out with the business responsibility reporting requirement. We used to call it BRR in 2012, and we made it mandatory for top 100 companies in the country. And after that, we expanded the scope expanded the coverage of this reporting to 500 companies in 2015, and then finally to top 1,000 companies in 2019. But somewhere, a few years back, considering the various global developments, especially India's commitment to SDGs, the Paris Accord, and so on, we thought that there is a need to revisit this disclosure space. So a committee was set up. I'll not bother you with the details of the process, but the bottom line is we have thoroughly revamped our sustainability disclosure requirements recently. And earlier this year, we announced our new disclosure format, which is called BRSR format. So how does it compare with the previous format? That's important to note. Our BRR regime was a fairly light touch regime. And one limitation in BRR was that the disclosure requirements were very qualitative in nature. Whereas BRSR, we didn't have access to hard data, if I can say. I mean, coming to your question on data. But now BRSR is a game changer. So BRSR has more than 500 data points. It will capture a lot of details on disclosures relating to climate, disclosures relating to the social side. So we followed very consciously. We followed a climate plus approach. It is not just the climate-oriented disclosure format. Of course, climate issues are there, but then it goes beyond. It goes on the social side and the governance side as well. So, as you mentioned that, this format is this new disclosure requirement will be applicable on a mandatory basis from the next financial year. Some companies have already started picking it up this year also. That's what I'm told. So we'll have to wait and see on the data side as to what do we exactly get. We'll have to wait and watch. But we are getting very encouraging feedback on the data front because it has, as I said, numerous data points which any users of the format will be able to compare it across companies and so on. So it will be consistent and comparable data, which was not the case with BRR. So we are excited about that. On the governance and the control aspect, so let me mention certain expectations at the company level or at the board level. So there is a requirement that you have to disclose if you have any board level committee which a company may set up for decision making on sustainability related issues. If you have a board level committee, we are seeking disclosures on that as part of the requirement. Then also, what is the frequency of review by the company boards on performance against sustainability policies? Then whether sustainability related policies are brought to the level of the board, are they approved by the board? These are all disclosure requirements which we have put in place, which we feel that help on the governance side. Also, we are requiring a statement by the director responsible for the BRSR. What are the ESG related challenges, targets, priorities, achievements, etc. So all these disclosure requirements have been put in place. We will also seek information on if the entity has carried out any independent assessment, any evaluation of the working of its sustainability policies. I like to make a distinction. We are not saying that independent assessment is a must, but we are seeking information whether you have carried out any independent assessment. So we are gently nudging the companies in that direction. Obviously, if you have independent assessment, it becomes more credible. The disclosure becomes more credible. And again, on the environmental related metrics, such as your GHG emissions, air emissions, the waste management, resource usage, we seek disclosure whether any third-party assurance has been done on these issues specifically. So it's a disclosure-based regime, and through these disclosures, we feel there would be certain governance and control aspects which are introduced in the system. So I'll just pause with that.
Thanks, Amarjit ji. In fact, I just want to give you a word of assurance based on my experience of interacting with India Inc. The last 2-3 months of interaction on any subject invariably comes around a little bit of sustainability as well. And almost all the organizations are very actively looking at BRSR for this fiscal itself. While they may not publish it, they would at least like to internally complete a dry run of it for this particular fiscal. I think that's a very heartening one. And thanks to SEBI for its leadership in this area.
So that's good to hear. Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah. I think only thing, Amarjit, if I can make a request, despite being a public forum, maybe the first 1 or 2 years, there could be a little bit of a checkbox approach. But I guess over time, it will become more qualitative. I think that's a little bit of a journey we'll have to go through. So that's my reading. I hope it is more qualitative than a checkbox, but my indications are it could be a little checkbox approach for the initial period.
Right. I hope it will evolve in the right direction.
It will. I'm super confident on that. So Patrick, thanks a lot for joining us. And I hope I can take the liberty of addressing you by first name.
Please do.
Patrick, the ESG disclosures encompass two things. One is the effect of ESG on the entity and effect of the entity's activities on the ESG issues. And since the information needs of users of ESG are likely to be different, now developing standards considering these two. One is effect of ESG on the entity and effect of entity on the ESG. How will a global reporting system address the same? And I just want to share with you that I am a member of IFRS Advisory Council. And over the last 2 years, I've been pleasantly surprised about the pace at which the global organizations have come together to prioritize sustainability reporting and to enable the International Sustainability Standards Board to be set up. And your thoughts, I will like to carry them with me into the next advisory council meeting as well. And this is a question I've had personally. Over to you, Patrick.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vijay, and good evening to you all. It's a pleasure and an honor to be in this distinguished panel and in this event. Indeed, we are at a very interesting moment of corporate reporting history. Jeff Hales clearly highlighted the history of that. The challenge is to be able to solve in a few years what has been solved by financial reporting over decades. So, we have to be at the same time optimistic, but also extremely determined. I would like to explain briefly the context from a European perspective for the information of the participants. As Jeff mentioned, a first stage was established in the EU in 2014 with the NFRD, the Non-Financial Reporting Directive. This was I wouldn't say it was a sandbox exercise, but it was a first step, going in the right direction, but leaving a lot of flexibility in terms of reporting to entities. And very quickly, it appeared that the first step was not enough, because we are still in a reporting landscape where data is not of sufficient quality. So the European Commission took an initiative, which is to establish a new legal framework called the CSRD, Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, and to establish key features to move into the future, because we need to meet the challenge of high quality sustainability data. I would say that we are at the very beginning, but also determinedly so, of creating what I would call a corporate reporting walking on two legs: the financial legs, the financial statements, and the sustainability leg, the sustainability statements. All of this, of course, under the integration process, guided by the governments and by, in particular, expressed in the management report. So what is the system about? The one that will be applicable on reporting year 23, early 2024. It's a system where all large entities, and by that I mean entities with more than 250 employees, and we're talking about more than 50% of the GDP in Europe, and we're talking about 50,000 entities. So all of them would have a mandatory regime of disclosures. The SMEs, the ones below, will be encouraged also to contribute under a simplified model. The coverage is on ESG, and so it's a comprehensive coverage of sustainability matters under principles, including double materiality, so what you have mentioned, Vijay, and which I will briefly outline in a minute. Under double materiality, and covering the challenges of businesses to create a sustainable development environment, and also to feed into the sustainable finance initiatives. Then this information will also be audited from day one under a limited assurance to start with, and moving to a reasonable assurance at a later stage, expected to be reasonably soon. It is also organized in a way that it could be digitized from day one, not only human readable, but also machine readable. And so it's covering the economy as a whole, and it's covering ESG, so it's very ambitious. In this context, the principles established at legal level are key, and that's in the CSRD. But there will be a bit like the accounting standards. Okay, we are drafting the standards that will be adopted by the Commission as delegated acts. So it's a regulation that is applicable to all EU entities directly. And we will have a set of standards, several sets of standards covering E, S, and G. The first one to be delivered in 2022 for the 2023 implementation. As regards double materiality, I would be tempted to say that yes, there is a big debate about that, but double materiality, so the inside-out perspective, what are the impacts the entity has on society and people, on planet and people, and the outside-in perspective, what is the impact of planet and people on the entity. At a moment in time, the difference is simple. You can put the focus on investors, which is possibly what we call financial materiality, and then you concentrate on, you put the emphasis on the impacts on your profitability or your sustainability position. But you cannot ignore the impacts that you are doing. So double materiality in the EU and under the EU principle is expecting that we cover impact first in order to address all the impacts an entity is creating on people and planet, and then say what are the ones that need to be addressed for reasons of relationships with many stakeholders, society, compliance with regulations or laws, human rights, etc., and the ones that may have quickly a financial impact. So we have to have the two dimensions operating in parallel. I would say that at global level, I am pretty optimistic that whatever will be covered under double materiality would encompass what is covered under financial materiality. The only difference would be that we are trying to inform other stakeholders than only investors or lenders. Now, responsible investors and responsible lenders have a broader spectrum of what can impact a company. So that's a way to reconcile possibly. But academic analysis of that has been scarce to a certain extent, so we need to progress. And we are publishing what we call double materiality conceptual guidelines soon, which I recommend that you have a look at. Sorry for having been a little long-winded.
Thanks, Patrick. It was extremely useful, including the background of initiatives in EU. And in particular, for me personally, the explanation on double materiality was very, very insightful. Thanks a lot for so patiently explaining the same. I know it will be quite tough for organizations initially to almost like riding two horses and trying to have a control. So thanks for that, Patrick. I'll come back to you a little later. Jessica, happy to have you here today in the panel, and apologies if I'm going to ask you a question which personally for me looks a little difficult. It looks a very tough question, but I'm sure with your experience, you will give us the right insights. So you're aware that stakeholders expect companies to accelerate their efforts to publish sustainability data, and they're trying to bring financial capital and natural capital at par, considering that both are essential for corporate performance. So what are your views on the same, Jessica?
Thank you very much. And just to share my thanks as well for the invitation. And as highlighted by some of the previous speakers, very timely following COP26, and indeed the developments that we've had over the last couple of years. So just to give context, Accounting for Sustainability was established by His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales. And when he first set AFRA up back in 2004, one of the things that he talked about a lot was the need to establish the reporting and decision-making systems that were really fit for purpose for the 21st century. So we know that as companies, as society, as governments, as investors, there are a huge number of challenges that we face to have a sustainable present, let alone a sustainable future. Whether that is around the climate crisis and the growing physical impacts of climate that we already know are hitting individuals, impacting lives and livelihoods, and will get worse into the future. The challenges that a transition away from a fossil fuel economy poses similarly, or indeed the crisis in nature. So we know that the economy and again, livelihoods and lives depend on nature, and yet we're seeing a real collapse in biodiversity and some of the essential support systems upon which we really all rely. But to add to your question, I think the other dimension that is really key to think about in this integrated way is also, of course, social and human capital. And so really joining the dots between the finance, the social and the natural capital is fundamental. So since the Prince of Wales established IFRS, we've really worked globally with all parts of the finance and accounting community. So whether that is the accounting bodies and the accounting community, and I think you've really seen a huge amount of work happening to leverage the skills that accounting professionals have. And I think that that's fundamental to the solutions that we have in the future. Whether providing the organisation with informed decisions, allocating financial resources and budgets, and then tracking progress, or indeed building the trust through assurance for the credibility and reliability of information that informs decisions. But also we work with investors and chief financial officers and indeed financial regulators and governments and the academic community around the world to inform our work. And I think you've really seen from all of those communities this realization that financial capital alone gives a very incomplete picture of performance and prospects. So even if, as Patrick was touching on with that single materiality, financial materiality lens, you can't properly understand the creation and maintenance and growth of that financial dimension unless you understand how its creation is dependent on the natural world and, of course, the people who are central to the creation of that capital, whether the people within the organization or the many stakeholders and communities upon which a company's profitability is derived. And so when IFRS was first setting up the International Integrated Reporting Council well over a decade ago, and as an aside, it's fantastic to see that realization of the work that we did over a decade ago with the ISSB. So very welcome progress there. But you really saw with that early work with integrated reporting just how an organization could benefit from understanding that dependency and also the impacts, because of course there is that circularity. And as Patrick was saying, double materiality, really they're two sides of the same coin. Something that you do, whether climate or other activities, very quickly impacts the organization's own performance from a financial perspective, and investors want to see that link. So organizations have been grappling with then how do you get the right data? How do you get the right insights? And I think that the work that we've done through IFRS provides a lot of that practical guidance and practical examples to help organizations to navigate that information. A few pointers, maybe just briefly. So starting with that perspective that the organization really needs to think through integration from governance and whether the right capabilities are part of the board. Does the board really step back as part of its strategy days and think through where are some of these independencies, where are some of the impacts that the organization has, and is it really looking after and sustaining the nature upon which it's based throughout the whole value chain and the people involved in that creation and performance. And then through to the strategy, the budgeting, the information. Is remuneration derived from some of those social and environmental issues? And of course, there's a lot of groundwork that organizations have done through sustainability reporting to have a lot of that information. But I think historically, it was almost like two parallel tracks within the organization. And this is where I think accountants can have such an important role, because accountants work across the whole organization and can really bring that insight to the point of the decision being made, rather than it being a recording or at worst a checkbox many months after the reporting on the financial side has been released. So bringing that forward into the heart of the organization and the organization's decision making, I think, is key. So hopefully that gives touches at least on some of the points that you were keen to see.
No, very helpful, Jessica. In fact, I like the assertiveness with which you said that financial capital alone is not enough for business to succeed. I think you so beautifully said that. And you also talked about the additional capitals, in particular social capital, human capital's importance for the businesses. Thanks a lot, Jessica. Heman, if I can come to you, Heman. Heman, do you believe a globally accepted sustainability reporting framework or a standard is a need of the hour? And practically, how will these global sustainability standards work alongside the jurisdictional initiatives? Let's say in India, we have the BRSR. So what are your quick thoughts on this, Heman? Heman, was I audible to you? Heman? Heman?
Mr. Heman, are you there? You seem to be not there, sir.
Okay. Maybe in the interest of time, we'll wait for him to connect back. Yeah. Amarjit, if I can come to you, Amarjit. See, as far as the stakeholders are concerned, I think you briefly touched on this also. Whenever they look for any information, they want to get a feeling that it is a reliable information. They can trust it. And what are your thoughts around the kind of assurance which can be given for the BRSR information which is to be published? And do you have any preference for an assurance mandate for BRSR?
I think that's a very relevant question. But let me give a short answer and a long answer. So the short answer is that at present, we have not mandated any assurance as such. And the idea is that BRSR is a paradigm shift from the previous disclosure template. So right now we are socializing the framework, and we want more and more companies to adopt ahead of time. So that is the first priority. But definitely at some point we'll have to get into the need for a mandatory assurance as well. So that's the short answer. The little longish answer is, just like audit is important for financial reporting, I think assurance would be very relevant for sustainability reporting. And I have some data point, in terms of a survey which was done by KPMG of the top 100 companies. I think this was done across 52 countries. The significant 80% have reporting on ESG out of those 100 companies, and up to 61% of those reporting, they were also obtaining assurance, whether required by the jurisdiction or not. It was anyway there. So the companies themselves chose to get the assurance. So I think that underscores the relevance and importance. And also, as Patrick mentioned, Europe is also heading in that direction, and with effect from January 2023, there would be the requirement to obtain a limited assurance. So there are some, ecosystem issues which will help in bringing in the mandatory requirement of assurance. That would be the assurance standards, some sort of capacity building in the, in the industry, and some training and some capacity building on the technical side, because we don't have the assurance professionals also the way we would like them to, do this work. So I hope, the way the sustainability debate is picking up all over the world, so this space will also get more traction. And ISCO also, I'm told, is working on this, on developing further guidance. So I think all of this will probably, so SEBI will definitely like to get in that space, but not right now, going forward at an appropriate time. But as of now, we do have some checks and balances, as I explained earlier.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot, Amanjit. Heman, welcome back. And I know in these virtual programs, Murphy's Law, it fails at the time it should not fail. So Heman, what I was trying to seek from you is, do you believe a globally accepted sustainability reporting framework or standard is the need of the hour? And in practice, how will these global sustainability standards work alongside jurisdictional initiatives? Like, for example, in India, we have the SEBI BRSR requirements. So how can they complement and be relevant? It should not again be an information overload where the same information gets reported in multiple ways. Your thoughts, Heman?
Am I audible? Yeah, thanks. Sorry for the issue earlier, and thanks to ICAI for inviting me for this session, and very good afternoon and evening to all the panel members and attendees here. So I think before I answer the question, a bit of background. I think I believe that due to the pandemic and global catastrophes which have been happening, companies and investors seem to understand the need and importance of integrating ESG with business. The focus on this has grown more so in the post an open letter in 2021 by Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, on prioritizing ESG related issues. Also in the letter, BlackRock has called for a global uniform ESG disclosure standard. So again, that is something which is sort of important to note. I think with that background, I'll try and answer the first question. So at present, I think there are several globally accepted reporting standards and frameworks, and we've heard about a few from the previous speakers: GRI, SASB, Integrated Reporting, TCFD, and in the Indian context, BRR, which has now got transformed into BRSR. With so many standards and frameworks available, there's always a question in the minds of corporates as to which standard or frameworks to choose from for their disclosures. While each is related to ESG, but I think slightly different in objective. So for example, if I talk about GRI, which is one of the most widely used frameworks as of now, it is designed to ensure that a sustainability report of a company provides complete picture of the material topics, their related impact, mitigation, and management policies around that. SASB, on the other hand, focuses on is more industry specific and focuses on KPIs across 77 industries. TCFD, we know, is focused on climate related risk opportunities, integrated reporting on value creation model, accountability of the organization across 6 capitals. So the standard of framework to adopt would differ from one business to the other, depending on what are the drivers, what are the pressures, what is the audience and stakeholders you're looking at, what is the data availability and processes within each organization. So I think having said all that, from a stakeholder's perspective, as well as from a company's perspective, tracking organizations' performance through multiple frameworks will always be confusing and cumbersome. So therefore, I fully agree that there is a pressing need to have one globally accepted sustainability reporting framework. While this may not be easy and may take time, I think we've seen significant steps in this direction through convergence of different frameworks and standards. And I think Jeffrey earlier mentioned about the Value Reporting Foundation, which is the merger of SASB and IIRC. Then another example is the WEF IBC launched framework, which refers to or maps KPIs to already established frameworks, just such as JRI, CDB, and SASB. So in a sense, it is not a new framework, but an attempt to bring other frameworks together. And recently at COP26, we saw the announcement from IFRS Foundation on the ISSB coming up with a standard. And again, we are seeing consolidation here. So the recently formed Value Reporting Foundation would merge with CDSB, which is the initiative of CDP. And I think from a sustainability reporting and disclosure perspective, this is one of the biggest pluses emerging out of the COP26. So I believe that as we move along, we'll see further convergence happening across standards and frameworks. Now coming to your second question on how the new sustainability reporting, global sustainability reporting standard may align to initiatives like BRSR in India. And so I think on BRSR, Mr. Amarjeet Singh spoke about, and I believe that BRSR is a positive move and a big change over the current BRR. Rather than viewing as a compliance requirement, if corporates use introduction of BRSR as an opportunity to embed ESG aspects into their strategy and operations, it'll be easier and more worthwhile to, I think, embrace BRSR. And I think for me to answer this question, I think we need to understand, and I think Mr. Amarjeet talked briefly about this, we need to understand how BRSR came into being. So a committee was formed to look into BRR disclosures and to revise the reporting to bring it in line with the national guidelines for responsible business conduct. There was a consultation paper released by the committee. There was extensive consultation across stakeholders. There was an attempt to look at different international frameworks. So after all that, BRSR was released with an alignment to the extent possible to global reporting frameworks. So, and BRSR gives you the flexibility to report information in the or cross-refer information in the BRSR to already existing reports or information that a company might be disclosing using international frameworks. So again, there is an attempt to avoid duplication as well. And I think BRSR also tries to cover regulatory and other aspects applicable in India. One such example would be EPR, which is the Extended Producer's Responsibility, which primarily talks about plastic waste management. So all in all, I would say that on one side, BRSR is aligned to current global reporting frameworks. At the same time, also covers local requirements in India. And as I think global frameworks evolve, I would assume and hope that BRSR would also evolve, and few years down the line, we would probably find one framework, even BRSR probably subsuming into that or not. I mean, that time will tell. But I think that's what something I as a practitioner in this field like to see.
Well, I agree, Heman. I agree with you. I don't think we have an answer on this today. I think time will tell. And probably it won't be too long before we get a clarity on how these will coexist or accommodate each other. So, Patrick, if we can come back to you, we have this technical readiness working group, which has been formed by the IFRS Foundation, and they have developed two prototypes as of now. One is on climate-related disclosures, and other is on general sustainability disclosure requirements. We believe that standard setters are all on the right path towards global sustainability reporting standards. Can you share from your experience, particularly so much of a rich experience in the European jurisdiction, what should be the roadmap for building a comprehensive global sustainability reporting system? And are you seeing any obstacles in the way which we need to be proactively addressing?
Thank you, Vijay. Let me state to start with that there are always obstacles, but you need to jump over obstacles. If we want to move forward, that's the only solution. And I think that we are seeing, and that was highlighted by the previous speaker, we are seeing a simplification, I think, and a consolidation of the standard setting landscape. Because, when we had a look at, during the preparatory work phase of the work that we have carried out, so I'm talking about a year ago, we investigated the various frameworks, standards that were available. Because at the end of the day, our goal in the EU is to build on and contribute to progress and convergence in sustainability reporting. So, it's not reinventing the wheel, but it's not either to take a system and promote it, because, there are so many jurisdictional objectives that need to be taken into account, that one size fits all wouldn't work. Now, that's not pessimistic at all, and that's not negative. It's not, the desire to have jurisdictions operating in isolation on a standalone basis. That would be totally wrong. We feel that co-construction is the way forward. So how is co-construction developing? First of all, you need to exchange views. You need a forum where you exchange views and you explain what you are doing. The EU regulation, upcoming regulation standards, BRSR, the prototypes that have been released during the COP26 by the TRWG of the IFRS Foundation. All of this is fine, but you need to exchange views. Then you need to identify if you are addressing, well, first of all, what are the underlying concepts that you're using, but also, more importantly, if at granular level of your disclosures, you are compatible. And I can tell you an experience, because we had a COP26 side event organized by the Commission with many participants, where we presented the IFRAG climate standard prototype working paper. And I personally presented it. And I had a slide, which is, by the way, you can consult on the IFRAG website, which explains that due on climate, due to the common inspiration, which is TCFD, at the end of the day, the prototype developed by IFRAG for the EU is onboarding TCFD objectives, is onboarding also the EU-specific objectives. We had I forgot to mention, and GRI was mentioned, we have a strategic alliance with GRI and the task force, which I share, in order not to reinvent the wheel on certain topics and to construct together, to co-construct. For example, on a key topic, which is biodiversity, where there is not much, we need to progress. So, we onboarded the GRI aspects. So when you apply the EU standards, we'll apply the EU standards, you will also be, in terms of climate-related disclosures, you will be absolutely compatible with the GRI. And we also believe that we have carefully discussed with the TRWG and analyzed the prototype, we also believe that there is a huge compatibility, if not, so close that we might have more, but we certainly do not have less. So, in my view, there is no problem. I think that if we want to stimulate progress at global level, we need to combine a momentum for global standards, but then global standards have to be adopted by jurisdictions. So, it has to be to avoid the lowest common denominator syndrome. And sometimes, or it has to agree on certain topics, be optional on certain other topics. That's the idea which has been developed by the IFRS Foundation of a baseline and of potential building blocks. But you also need to encourage the front runners. I mean, those jurisdictions that really want to create a sustainability reporting landscape of, that is at one same time comprehensive and high quality. So I wouldn't put things as under a competitive, approach, but on the contrary, on a complementary and encouraging and stimulating environment.
Sure. So thanks, Patrick. Actually, it's been very insightful. So I've received a request that we need to close down now. Jessica and Hemant, would you have any 10 seconds quick closing comments before I can hand over to you, Agnesh? Personally, I had at least 2 questions to each of you before we could close, but I need to be conscious about the time. So if there are any 10 second quick observations, and then it's back to Agnesh. Jessica?
Thank you. Yeah, maybe if I just make one final remark, and as an aside, I should add that I'm vice chair of GRI, and as mentioned, was involved in the IIRC setup and on its council, and so have connections across to a lot of the different organisations involved in the reporting landscape. Capital is global, climate and emissions are global. Nature and the environment doesn't respect borders. People flow from one country to another. So I think we really need to find a way to create global standards where they need to. I agree with Patrick's point. Each country, each jurisdiction, each sector has different issues that they need to grapple with, and the reporting standards need to respect that. But we can't end up with a situation where carbon or biodiversity, the core units are measured in different ways, and people have to try and reconcile across different boundaries. So I think that where we can find global consistency where it really needs to be, and then, as Patrick was underlining, build from that and take the aspects that are most relevant for each jurisdiction. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. It resonates with the determination which Patrick had mentioned. So I think it's good. So Hemant, 10 seconds and we hand over to Agnesh. I'm sorry for not giving adequate.
No problem. So just, I think, want to mention that we discussed about a globally one global framework for reporting. I think one aspect that is also important and we need to consider is assurance over non-financial data. That is because now more and more companies are publishing data in the public domain. More and more companies, thanks to the pandemic, the awareness is more, and to COP26, more and more companies are committed to net zero, carbon neutral targets. So I think assurance will also gain a lot of importance for companies to track performance against these commitments and targets, and for external stakeholders, which is investors and the broader stakeholders, to get comfort over whatever data is put out in the public domain. At the same time, internally also for the, I would say, management and board, it's important that they get comfort through assurance on what data they put out. So,
thanks, Hemant. And just for the benefit on assurance, at the International Audit Assurance Standards Board, we have a standard on extended external reporting, which covers these. And I'm deeply humbled to have moderated such a wonderful panel. Lots of learning. I personally would have loved to interact a little more, but I'm sure everyone will understand the realistic assessment of time. So thank you all, and over to you, Agnesh.
Thank you. MP Vijay Kumarji for wonderfully moderated the session. Thanks to Amarjit Singh. Thanks to Mr. Patrick, Miss Jessica Fries, and CA Heman. Thank you all. We have learned a lot about the people, planet, prosperity, partnership, and all these. But today we got to learn about the perspective of everything from the learned speakers, and everyone has been immensely, helped in terms of a great learning curve for all of us. Thanks to all panelists. Again, to CA MP Vijay Kumarji and Mr. CA Rakesh Agrawalji for being a wonderful moderator. And last but not the least, all the participants and viewers across the globe. And I'll be very happy to inform you that we got more than 1,000 participants today in this webinar. And kudos to the SRSB and the International Affairs Committee staff members, and my personal thanks to ICAI for having given me the honor to be a moderator for this summit. See you all tomorrow at India Standard Time at 5 p.m. And thanks once again to everybody. Good night. Goodbye.